At the family Christmas gift exchange, I gave my brother a sealed envelope, 3 months of covered rent. He opened it, looked around, and said, tries to compensate for the fact that he's not needed by this family. The whole room erupted with laughter, except for me. I took the envelope back and said, useful to know. 10 minutes later, the whole family was shouting, please listen to us. Hey everyone, I need to get this off my chest because what happened at Christmas is still eating at me 3 months later. This story is about how one moment at a family gift exchange completely destroyed my relationship with my entire family. And honestly, I'm not sure I care anymore. So I, 29, female, have always been what you'd call the practical one in my family. While my brother Jake, 32, was the golden child who could do no wrong, I was the one who quietly got my shit together, worked multiple jobs through college, and built a decent life for myself. Our family dynamic has always been pretty clear. Jake gets the praise, the support, and the assumptions that he'll succeed, while I get the lectures about being more like him. Growing up, this favoritism was blatant. Jake played varsity football, so every Friday night was about cheering him on. The whole family would pile into the car to watch his games, complete with homemade signs and coordinated team colors. My parents knew the names of all his teammates, coaches, and even the cheerleaders. I was on the debate team and honor roll, but somehow that never warranted the same enthusiasm. When I made it to state finals for debate, my parents said they couldn't attend because it conflicted with Jake's playoff game. When I won first place in the regional academic competition, they congratulated me over dinner, but spent the rest of the meal discussing Jake's football scholarship prospects. The gift disparity was especially painful. For Jake's 16th birthday, they bought him a used car. Nothing fancy, but it was his own transportation. For mine, I got a gift card to Target and was told I could share Jake's car when he didn't need it. When Jake wanted to go to prom, they paid for his tuxedo rental, corsage, and dinner. When my junior prom came around, they told me I should get a job if I wanted those extras. Speaking of jobs, they encouraged Jake to focus on football and academics rather than work during high school. These are your glory days, Dad would say. There's time for work later. But by 15, they were suggesting I find part-time employment to learn responsibility and contribute to my college fund. I worked at the local grocery store, bagging groceries and collecting carts in all kinds of weather, while Jake spent his weekends at team parties and training camps. When Jake wanted to go to an expensive private college, Mom and Dad took out loans and depleted their savings without hesitation. They researched financial aid options, visited campuses with him, and even hired a college consultant to help with his applications. When I graduated valedictorian and got into several good schools, including some with substantial merit scholarships, they told me I should look at community college first to save money and be practical. The irony wasn't lost on me that being the better student somehow made me less deserving of educational investment. The pattern continued into adulthood. Jake majored in communications, partied through college, and graduated with a 2.8 GPA and no real job prospects. I got a degree in accounting, worked as a bookkeeper through school, and landed a good position at a mid-sized firm right after graduation. But somehow, at every family gathering, the conversation centered around Jake's potential and when he'd find his path, while my steady career was just background noise. The real kicker came when Jake decided he wanted to be an entrepreneur. He had this grand idea for a food truck business, despite having never worked in food service or business management. My parents were thrilled. They talked about his vision and creative spirit constantly. When he needed startup money, they didn't hesitate to co-sign a loan for $40,000. The food truck lasted 8 months. Jake had zero business sense, couldn't handle the early hours, and apparently thought being your own boss meant showing up whenever you felt like it. When it failed, my parents absorbed the debt without complaint and spent months reassuring Jake that it was just a learning experience and that all successful entrepreneurs fail first. Meanwhile, I had quietly been building my own success. After 3 years at the firm, I'd gotten my CPA license and started taking on freelance clients. I was good with small business finances, tax planning, and helping people organize their money. What started as weekend work grew into a full client roster. By the time I was 26, I'd left my corporate job and was running my own practice. I didn't make a big announcement about it. I just did the work, built relationships, and grew my business steadily. My first major client was a local restaurant owner who was drowning in disorganized receipts and tax issues. I spent weeks helping him set up proper bookkeeping systems, and by the end of the year, I'd saved him thousands in potential penalties and helped him identify areas where he was hemorrhaging money. Word spread, and soon I had other small business owners calling, One of my favorite success stories was a young woman who started a dog grooming business out of her garage. She was talented at grooming, but had no idea how to handle the business side. When she came to me, she was taking cash payments and stuffing receipts in a shoebox, had no idea if she was making a profit, and was terrified of tax season. I helped her set up a simple but effective accounting system, showed her how to track expenses and revenue, and helped her price her services appropriately. Within 6 months, she'd moved into a proper shop space and hired an assistant. Within a year, she was turning away customers because she was booked solid. These were the stories I was proud of. Real people building real businesses with my help. But when family asked what I was up to, I'd say I was doing accounting work, and they'd nod and change the subject. They had no idea that my little accounting thing was pulling in 6 figures annually, and that I'd bought a house, maxed out my retirement contributions, and had a healthy emergency fund. I'd also started investing in a diversified portfolio and had even begun looking at rental properties as a way to build long-term wealth. The contrast became even starker when Jake moved back in with our parents at 29. His next venture, some kind of online marketing scheme, had also crashed and burned. He'd been living with them for 2 years now, contributing minimally to household expenses and spending most of his time playing video games and talking about his next big idea. During this time, I noticed my parents struggling more financially. Dad had taken an early retirement package that was less generous than expected, and Mom was still working part-time at 63. They were clearly feeling the strain of supporting Jake while managing their own reduced income, but they never complained. When I subtly offered to help with anything, they'd brush it off and say they were fine. This brings me to 3 months ago, in early December. I was having coffee with my mom when she mentioned that Jake was stressed about rent for his girlfriend's apartment. Apparently, he'd been splitting the rent with Sarah for her place, but he was behind on his portion, and she was threatening to kick him out. Mom was worried because if Sarah followed through, Jake would have to move back into his childhood bedroom full-time, and things were already cramped. I asked how much he needed, thinking maybe it was a couple $100s. Mom said Jake owed 3 months back rent at $800 per month, so $2,400 total. She and Dad were trying to figure out how to help him without depleting their savings account entirely. Something about this situation really bothered me. Here were my parents, both over 60, stressing about finances and considering draining their savings to bail out my 32-year-old brother's rent debt. Meanwhile, I had that amount sitting in my checking account without it affecting my budget at all. That's when I decided to do something that felt generous and family-oriented. I would give Jake the rent money as a Christmas gift. Not a loan, a gift. It would solve his immediate problem, take the financial pressure off my parents, and maybe show him that his little sister had actually done pretty well for herself. I thought about it for a few days and felt really good about the plan. Christmas was always about family, and this felt like something that would genuinely help while also maybe changing how my family saw me. Instead of being the boring, practical one, maybe I'd be the successful sister who stepped up when needed. I went to the bank and got the money in cash, 24 crisp $100 bills. I put them in an envelope with a note that said, "Jake, this should cover your 3 months back rent with Sarah. Merry Christmas, and here's to a fresh start in the new year. Love, your sister." I sealed it in a nice Christmas card and felt proud of myself for being able to help. Christmas Eve at my parents' house was the usual chaos. My aunts, uncles, and cousins were there, along with my grandparents. The house smelled like ham and cinnamon rolls, and Christmas music played in the background. Jake was in his element, entertaining everyone with stories and jokes. He had a natural charisma that I'd always envied. He could walk into any room and immediately become the center of attention. He'd brought Sarah, who seemed nice enough but clearly wasn't thrilled about the rent situation based on the tense conversations I overheard. I noticed how Sarah kept checking her phone and how Jake would quickly change the subject whenever anyone asked about their living situation. At one point, I overheard my cousin asking Sarah about their apartment, and Jake jumped in with some joke about domestic bliss that got everyone laughing but didn't actually answer the question. The house was decorated exactly the way it had been for the past 20 years. My mom's collection of vintage ornaments on the tree, garland wrapped around the banister, and the same ceramic nativity scene on the mantel that I remembered from childhood. Everything felt familiar and warm, which made what was about to happen even more jarring. My Aunt Linda had brought her famous Christmas cookies, and my grandmother was holding court in her usual chair by the fireplace, asking everyone about their lives and dispensing advice. Uncle Bob was manning the bar cart, making his signature eggnog that was probably 50% bourbon. My cousins Emma and David were there with their kids, who were running around in matching Christmas pajamas and asking every 5 minutes when they could open presents. The gift exchange was always a big production in our family. We drew names from a hat at Thanksgiving, and everyone tried to give thoughtful gifts around a $50 limit. It was a tradition that went back to when we were all kids, and our grandparents started it as a way to make sure everyone got something special without breaking anyone's budget. I'd drawn my cousin Emma's name and gotten her some nice skincare products from Sephora, but I was excited about my special gift for Jake. There was a specific ritual to the exchange. We'd all gather in the living room after dinner, and the youngest family member would play Santa, distributing gifts one by one. Everyone would watch as each gift was opened, and there was always lots of oohing and ahhing over the thoughtfulness of the choices. People would take photos, and Mom would make sure to get a picture of each person opening their gift. When it was time for the exchange, everyone gathered in the living room. Gifts were opened one by one, with lots of oohing and awing over sweaters, gift cards, and books. When Jake opened Emma's gift to him, a nice bottle of cologne, everyone praised her thoughtfulness. That's when I stood up and said, "Actually, Jake, I have something else for you." I pulled out the envelope and handed it to him. "This is from me. I thought you could use it more than another sweater." The room got quiet as Jake looked at the envelope curiously. He opened it carefully, and I watched his face as he saw the cash and read the note. For a second, I thought I saw relief and maybe even gratitude. But then he looked up, glanced around the room at all our family members watching, and smiled that same condescending smile I'd seen 1,000 times growing up. "Wow," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. $2,400. I guess this is how she tries to compensate for the fact that she's not needed by this family." The room erupted in laughter. My dad chuckled and shook his head, like Jake had made a clever observation. My mom giggled and said something about how I'd always been too serious about money. My aunts and uncles laughed, and I heard someone say, "Oh, Jake," in that affectionate way people use when someone's being charmingly awful. Everyone was laughing except me. I sat there, feeling like I'd been slapped across the face in front of my entire family. The gift I'd been proud of, the gesture I thought showed love and success, had just been turned into a punchline about my inadequacy. I stood up, walked over to Jake, and held out my hand. "Give it back." He looked confused. "What?" "The money. Give it back to me." Jake's smile faltered. "Come on, I was just joking around. Give it back." The laughter in the room died down as people realized something was happening. Jake looked around at our family, probably expecting someone to tell me I was being too sensitive. But the mood had shifted. I kept my hand extended. I said, "Give it back." Reluctantly, Jake handed me the envelope. I took it, looked around the room at all the faces that had been laughing at me just moments before, and said, "Useful to know where we all stand." I walked to the front hall, got my coat and purse, and headed for the door. Behind me, I could hear my mom calling my name and asking where I was going. "Home," I said, without turning around. "Thanks for the lovely evening." I made it to my car before anyone came after me. As I was backing out of the driveway, I could see my dad on the front porch motioning for me to roll down my window. I drove past him. The first call came before I'd even made it home. My mom, asking why I was being so dramatic and couldn't I take a joke. I let it go to voicemail. Then Jake called. Then my dad. Then my mom again. By the time I got home, I had 6 missed calls. I poured myself a large glass of wine and listened to the voicemails. They ranged from confused to annoyed to slightly apologetic, but they all had the same underlying message. I was overreacting to harmless family teasing. The next morning, Christmas Day, I woke up to 12 more missed calls and a series of increasingly frantic text messages. Apparently, Jake had told Sarah about the rent money and that he'd lost it due to a misunderstanding. Sarah had given him an ultimatum: pay the back rent by New Year's or she was done. My parents were panicking because they realized they might have to cover the rent after all, and they didn't have the money readily available without dipping into their savings. The family gathering they'd planned for Christmas Day was apparently tense, with Jake in a foul mood and my parents trying to figure out their finances. Around noon, my entire family showed up at my house. I watched from my living room window as they got out of 3 different cars. My parents, Jake and Sarah, my Aunt Linda and Uncle Bob, and my cousins Emma and David. They looked like an intervention delegation. When I didn't answer the door after they'd been ringing the bell and knocking for 5 minutes, my dad called my phone. I answered. "We're all here," he said. "We need to talk to you." "I can see that. I'm not interested. Please, just open the door." Jake wants to apologize. He had his chance to apologize last night. Instead, he called me 6 times to tell me I can't take a joke. I could hear voices in the background, people telling Dad what to say. "Look, we all feel bad about how things went. Can we please just come in and work this out?" "No, please listen to us." That's when I heard it. the entire group of them shouting in the background. Please listen to us. I hung up. They stayed on my porch for another 20 minutes, taking turns knocking and calling my phone. I turned off my phone and read a book. Eventually, they left. The aftermath has been something else entirely. Over the next few days, I got calls from various family members trying to mediate. The story I heard from them was that Jake felt terrible, and that the whole thing had been blown out of proportion. My Aunt Linda called first, using her diplomatic voice that she usually reserved for family crises. Honey, I think everyone just got caught up in the moment, she said. You know how Jake is. He makes jokes when he's uncomfortable. I don't think he meant anything by it. My cousin Emma was next, suggesting that maybe I could talk to Jake privately and work things out. He's really stressed about the Sarah situation, she said. I think he just wasn't thinking clearly. Even my grandmother called, which surprised me because she usually stayed out of family drama. But her message was different from the others. I've been thinking about what happened, she said slowly. And I want you to know that if someone had given me that kind of money and then laughed at me for it, I would have taken it back too. Some gifts are too precious to waste on people who don't appreciate them. That conversation made me cry in a way that the others hadn't. My grandmother had always been the family peacemaker, but she was also the most honest person I knew. If she thought my reaction was justified, maybe I wasn't crazy after all. What really bothered me wasn't just Jake's comment, though that was bad enough. It was the immediate, universal laughter from my family. Not one person in that room had looked uncomfortable or told him he'd crossed a line. They'd all found it hilarious that their successful daughter-sister cousin was trying to compensate for not being needed. I kept replaying the scene in my mind, analyzing every face in the room. My dad's chuckle and headshake, like Jake had made a particularly clever observation. My mom's giggle and comment about me being too serious about money, as if my financial success was somehow a character flaw. My aunts and uncles laughing along, probably not even thinking about how the comment might affect me. The casual cruelty of it all was stunning. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I'd spent years quietly supporting myself, building a business, and asking for nothing from anyone. I'd offered to help my brother out of genuine care, with money I'd earned through my own hard work. And the response was to mock me and suggest that my gesture came from some pathetic desire to prove my worth to a family that didn't value me. I started thinking about other instances where my family had dismissed my achievements or reduced them to something less than they were. When I bought my house, the conversation at the next family gathering focused on how lucky I was to be in a position to buy, not on the years of careful saving and planning that had made it possible. When I got my CPA license, my mom mentioned it to people as if it were equivalent to Jake's latest get-rich-quick scheme. When I was featured in that business magazine article, no one in my family even saw it, because I'd stopped bothering to share my professional accomplishments with them. A week after Christmas, Jake showed up at my office. I was in between client meetings when my receptionist told me my brother was there to see me. I was so surprised that I told her to send him back. He looked rough, unshaven, wearing the same clothes I'd seen him in for the past several months, clearly stressed. I need to talk to you, he said, sitting down across from my desk. Okay, I'm sorry about what I said. I was trying to be funny, and it came out wrong. I waited for him to continue. The thing is, I really do need that money. Sarah's serious about kicking me out, and if I can't pay the rent, I'll have to move back into mom and dad's full-time. My stuff is already taking up half their house. And I was hoping maybe we could work something out. I could pay you back over time, or maybe do some work for you, or... I looked at my brother, this 32-year-old man who had never held a steady job, asking me to bail him out after publicly humiliating me. Jake, let me ask you something. Do you actually think I'm not needed by this family? He shifted uncomfortably. No, I don't know. I guess I felt weird about you giving me money. It's embarrassing. Why is it embarrassing? Because you're my little sister. I should be the one helping you out, not the other way around. And there it was. The real issue wasn't that he didn't appreciate the help. It was that accepting help from me challenged his position as the favored child, the one everyone expected success from. You know what, Jake? You were right the first time. You don't need me. Find another way to solve your problem. His face fell. Come on, don't be like this. It's not like you can't afford it. Whether I can afford it isn't the point, then what is the point? You're going to let me lose my girlfriend and move back home because your feelings got hurt? I stood up. I'm going to let you face the consequences of your choices because you're a grown man who thinks asking his little sister for help is more embarrassing than taking money from your retirement-age parents. That's not fair. No, what's not fair is expecting me to bail you out after you publicly humiliated me for trying to help you. Jake left without the money. That evening, I got another round of calls from family members. Apparently, Jake had told them about our conversation, and now I was the villain for holding grudges and putting money before family. What they didn't understand was that this was never about the money. I could have given Jake 10 times that amount without affecting my lifestyle. This was about respect and about the painful realization that my family saw my success as a resource to be tapped rather than an achievement to be proud of. 2 weeks later, I heard through my mom that Jake and Sarah had broken up. He'd moved back in with my parents full-time, and Sarah had found a new roommate. My parents were struggling with the cramped living situation and the additional expenses of supporting Jake entirely. In February, my dad called to ask if I would consider hiring Jake part-time to help with basic bookkeeping for my business. The request was so tone-deaf that I actually laughed. "Dad, Jake has never shown any interest in accounting or business. He's failed at every job he's tried, and you want me to hire him to handle financial records for my clients. He's been taking some online courses," Dad said defensively. "Then he can apply for entry-level positions at other companies. But if you hired him, he could learn from you, and it would help him get on his feet. And what would help me? Having my business associated with someone with Jake's track record?" Dad got quiet. Finally, he said, "I just thought, since we're family, you thought I should risk my professional reputation to give Jake another chance to disappoint people?" We hung up without resolving anything. In March, 3 months after the Christmas incident, I learned that my parents were considering selling their house. The combination of early retirement, reduced income, and supporting Jake had put them in a difficult financial position. They were looking at downsizing to a smaller place, possibly a condo. This news came from my cousin Emma, who called to ask if I knew about the situation. I didn't, because my parents hadn't mentioned their financial struggles to me. They were, however, apparently discussing it with other family members and asking for advice. "I think they're embarrassed to ask you for help," Emma said. "Everyone knows you're doing well, but after what happened at Christmas, what about it? Well, they know you're mad about the whole thing with Jake, and they probably think you won't want to help. Did they ask you to call me?" "No, but I think someone should. They're really stressed, and Uncle Tom shouldn't have to worry about losing his house at his age." I told Emma I'd think about it, but honestly, I was furious. My parents were discussing their financial problems with the extended family and considering selling their home, but they hadn't said a word to me. They were apparently more comfortable asking cousins and siblings for advice than approaching their daughter who actually had both the resources and expertise to help. A week later, I made a decision that surprised even me. I called a family meeting. I sent a group text to my parents, Jake, and my Aunt Linda, the family organizer, saying I wanted to meet with everyone to discuss some things. I suggested we meet at my house the following Sunday afternoon. The responses were immediate and eager. Everyone was clearly hoping this meant I was ready to reconcile and that things could go back to normal. Sunday afternoon, they all showed up looking hopeful and slightly nervous. I had prepared coffee and snacks, which seemed to reassure them that this was going to be a friendly conversation. "I wanted to talk to all of you about what happened at Christmas and where we go from here," I began, once everyone was settled in my living room. My mom immediately jumped in. "We're all so glad you called this meeting. We've missed you so much, and we really want to put this behind us." That's actually what I want to talk about. This idea of putting it behind us. I looked around the room at their faces. Jake was fidgeting, my dad looked uncomfortable, and my mom was smiling hopefully. I've been thinking a lot about our family dynamics and my place in them, and I've realized some things that I need to share with you. My Aunt Linda leaned forward encouragingly. "We're all ears, honey. First, I want to address the money situation. Mom, Dad, I know you're considering selling the house because of financial pressure," Emma told me. My parents exchanged glances. Dad cleared his throat. "We didn't want to burden you with our problems. But you were comfortable burdening Emma and Linda and Bob with them? That's different," Mom said quickly. "They're not, we didn't want you to feel obligated. To help my own parents?" The room got quiet. Here's what I find interesting. When Jake needed money, everyone expected me to give it to him. No questions asked. When I offered to help you guys years ago, you brushed me off. But when you're in real financial trouble, you discuss it with everyone except the person in the family who actually has money and financial expertise. Jake spoke up. "Look, if this is about Christmas, I already apologized." I turned to him. "Jake, you apologized for the way you said something. You never acknowledged that what you said was fundamentally wrong. What do you mean? You said I was trying to compensate for not being needed by this family. Do you believe that's true?" He looked around the room as if seeking help from our parents. "No, of course you're needed." "How? How am I needed?" Another uncomfortable silence. "Because you're our daughter," Mom said finally. "Your family." But what role do I play in this family? What do I contribute that you value? I could see them struggling with the question, which was answer enough. I'll tell you what I've observed. My role in this family is to be the responsible one who takes care of herself and doesn't cause problems. When there's a financial crisis, I'm supposed to quietly write a check. When Jake needs something, I'm supposed to provide it without expecting gratitude or respect. When you need advice or help, you go to other people because including me might create an obligation. Dad tried to interrupt, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. You see my success as a resource, not as an achievement. None of you have ever asked me about my business, my goals, or my challenges. You don't know how I built my practice or what I'm proud of. But you know I have money, so when someone needs money, you think of me. That's not true, Mom protested. We're proud of you. Really? Name one thing about my business that you're proud of. Silence. Name one client I've helped or one challenge I've overcome. More silence. Name one goal I've shared with you about my career. My Aunt Linda looked around nervously. Maybe we could all try to communicate better. Aunt Linda, this isn't about communication. This is about fundamental respect. And the truth is, you all see me as the boring, practical one who should be grateful to contribute to Jake's life and your emergencies, but who isn't interesting enough to include in real conversations or important enough to consider before making major decisions. I stood up and walked to my mantel, where I kept a framed photo of myself at a conference where I'd been invited to speak about small business financial planning. This picture was taken 6 months ago in Denver. I was the keynote speaker at a conference of 500 accountants and business owners. I was invited because I've built a practice that's respected in my field. I've helped dozens of small businesses organize their finances, save money, and plan for growth. Last year, I was featured in an article about young entrepreneurs in our city's business magazine. I turned back to face them. Did anyone in this room know any of that? Their faces told me the answer. I didn't mention it because I've learned that my accomplishments aren't interesting to this family. They're just background noise compared to Jake's potential and your immediate needs. Jake looked genuinely shocked. I didn't know you were doing all that stuff, because you never asked. In 10 years of family gatherings, you've never once asked me about my work beyond, how's the accounting thing going? My mom was crying now. We didn't know you felt this way. I felt this way because this is how you treated me. And Christmas was just the final confirmation of what I already knew. I sat back down and looked at each of them. So here's where we stand. I love you all, but I'm done participating in a family dynamic where my only value is as a resource. If you want a relationship with me, it needs to be based on mutual respect and genuine interest in each other's lives. What does that mean exactly? Dad asked. It means that before I help anyone financially again, I need to see evidence that you value me as a person, not just as a bank account. It means Jake needs to find his own solutions to his problems instead of expecting family bailouts. And it means that when you're facing challenges, you include me in conversations instead of going around me. I looked directly at Jake. And it means that if you ever speak to me the way you did at Christmas again, I will consider it the end of our relationship. The room was quiet for a long moment. Finally, my dad spoke up. What do you need from us? I need you to think about whether you actually want a relationship with me or whether you just want access to my resources, because I'm not doing this halfway anymore. They left that afternoon without any clear resolution, but something had shifted. For the first time, I'd been completely honest about how I saw our family dynamics, and they'd been forced to confront some uncomfortable truths. It's been a month since that conversation, and things have been slowly changing. My mom has started calling me just to chat, not because she needs something. She's asked me about my business and actually listened to my answers. Dad mentioned my keynote speech to his golf buddies, and seemed proud when he told me about it. Jake has been the slowest to change, but even he's made some effort. He got a part-time job at a local restaurant and is actually showing up consistently. He hasn't asked me for money, though I suspect he's still getting some support from our parents. Most importantly, they've stopped expecting me to fix everyone's problems while being grateful for the privilege. When Mom mentioned they were still considering downsizing, I offered to look at their finances and help them create a plan. They accepted, and we're working together to find solutions that don't involve me just writing a check. The Christmas incident taught me something valuable. Setting boundaries isn't about being mean or holding grudges. It's about insisting on respect and refusing to accept less than you deserve from the people who claim to love you. I still have the envelope with the $2,400 in my desk drawer. Sometimes I look at it and remember how excited I was to give that gift, and how quickly it turned into a weapon against me. But I also remember the feeling of taking it back and walking away. That was the moment I chose my own dignity over their expectations. My family is slowly learning that my success isn't something they're entitled to, and that my help comes with the requirement of basic respect. It's taken 30 years, but I think we might finally be building a relationship based on who we actually are, rather than who they assumed I should be. And if they can't manage that, well, I've proven I can walk away. That's a power I never knew I had. And now that I do, everything has changed.